Anthony stood in the corner of the reception hall, staring at the woman in white as she laughed softly beside her groom. Her fingers curled delicately around a champagne flute, but her eyes kept avoiding his like they might catch fire if they met. Sally looked beautiful, exactly how she always dreamed of looking on her wedding day, elegant, calm, and devastatingly out of reach. His chest burned in a way he hadn't expected. He thought he'd made peace with all of this, thought leaving her for Gloria was the right move. She was exciting, daring, a burst of color in the middle of a dull relationship. Or so he convinced himself. But standing there now, watching Sally in someone else's arms, Anthony felt something twist painfully inside him. Regret, maybe, or realization, cruel and late. Across the room, Gloria stood stiffly, arms crossed, eyes cutting sharp angles toward him every time he glanced Sally's way. David, the groom, laughed with one of his friends, completely unaware of the storm brewing behind Anthony's strained smile. It hadn't always been like this. A year ago, Anthony and Sally were picking out furniture for the apartment they thought they'd grow old in. They had matching coffee mugs. They had routines. She had her morning tea with 2 sugars. He always forgot to buy eggs, and she never minded. It wasn't thrilling, no, but it was solid, real. But Gloria came along like a firecracker in a quiet room, loud, impossible to ignore, and reckless. She made Anthony feel like he was missing something by being with Sally. Like maybe love was supposed to be chaos, not calm. And in his foolishness, he chose the fire over the warmth. Jealousy doesn't suit you, Gloria said beside him now, her voice low, sharp as glass. He didn't respond right away, just kept watching as David whispered something in Sally's ear that made her blush and roll her eyes, the way she used to with him. She moved on. You did too. Let it go, Gloria added, almost annoyed. Anthony turned toward her. Did I? Gloria's smirk wavered, just for a second. The worst part was, Sally hadn't begged him to stay. She hadn't cried or screamed or tried to change his mind. When he told her he was leaving her for Gloria, she looked at him with a pain he couldn't touch and just nodded, like she knew it was already over before he said the words. That was what haunted him, how easy she made it for him to go. Now, seeing her glowing beside David, a man who clearly adored her, Anthony felt the weight of every wrong decision settle onto his shoulders. David raised his glass to give a speech, and the room went quiet. He smiled down at Sally with pure affection. I never thought I'd be lucky enough to meet someone like her. Sally walked into my life with grace and patience and love I didn't think I deserved. But she gave it to me anyway, and every day, I try to be the man worthy of it. The crowd clapped, and Sally's eyes glistened. Anthony looked away, bile rising in his throat. He felt Gloria's hand slip into his. But even that didn't feel like comfort. It felt like something he didn't want anymore. Something he'd clung to out of pride, not love. Later, when the dance floor filled and Sally slow danced with David under the soft glow of fairy lights, Anthony stood outside on the balcony, staring into the night, alone, even with Gloria behind him. The music drifted out through the open doors, muffled and distant. He'd told himself Sally would never move on, that she'd wait, that maybe, just maybe, she'd still be there if things with Gloria didn't work out, but she had moved on, gracefully, completely, and watching her start a new life with someone else wasn't just painful, it was madness. Anthony didn't go back inside. The cold air pressing against his skin was easier to bear than the warmth of the room where everything he'd lost was celebrating without him. He leaned on the balcony railing, jaw clenched, trying to quiet the voice in his head that kept whispering, "You did this to yourself." Behind him, Gloria stepped out, wrapping her shawl tighter around her shoulders. You've been out here too long. People are going to notice. He didn't turn to her. Let them. You're acting like this is your funeral instead of her wedding. He laughed bitterly. Feels about the same. Gloria moved to stand beside him, her face tense. Don't start regretting now, Anthony. You knew what you were doing when you walked away from her. Don't make it worse by pretending you're some broken-hearted victim. I'm not pretending. His voice cracked with quiet anger. I just didn't think it would hurt like this. Gloria flinched at his honesty. Her pride couldn't take much more of it. She'd won, hadn't she? She got the guy. So why did it feel like she was constantly having to remind him she was enough? Anthony pushed off the railing. You know the worst part? It's not just that I lost her. It's that she looks happy. Happier than she ever was with me. Maybe she is, Gloria said too quickly. He turned to look at her for the first time that night. Her eyes narrowed slightly, but her voice was steady. You left because you weren't happy. Don't rewrite the story just because the ending didn't suit you. Anthony studied her face, wondering if this was how Sally felt during those last few weeks, the sickening realization that the person you loved was already slipping away. And now here they were, standing in the wreckage, pretending it wasn't burning. Inside, the music changed. A familiar song, their song, the one Sally used to hum under her breath when she cooked. The one he once played on repeat just to hear her laugh. He walked back in without a word, brushing past Gloria, who stood frozen in the cold, her lips parting, but no sound coming out. As he stepped into the soft lighting of the reception again, his eyes locked onto Sally across the room. She was spinning with David, her dress floating around her like something out of a dream. Her laughter was real, pure. Nothing about it was meant for him anymore. He felt something fracture in his chest. David dipped her slightly, and their eyes met Sally's and Anthony's. For just a split second, she paused. Something flickered, a shadow maybe, or a ghost of everything they used to be. But then she smiled and looked back at David. It was that moment that did it. Anthony turned away, heart pounding, and walked straight toward the bar. He needed something, anything to drown out what he was feeling. He downed a whiskey without a word, then another. Easy there, said a voice beside him. David, of all people. I wasn't going to say anything tonight, David said quietly, but I think it's fair you hear it. Anthony raised an eyebrow, but said nothing. You broke her, David continued. You shattered Sally, but you know what's insane? She never badmouthed you, not once. Even when she cried until she couldn't speak, even when she found out about Gloria, she still defended you. Anthony's throat tightened. David leaned in a little closer. So if you think watching her move on hurts, just imagine how much it took for her to smile today. Anthony stared at his empty glass, but his reflection was the only thing staring back. You had her, and you threw her away, David said, with quiet finality. Don't make the mistake of thinking she's still yours in any way. Then he walked away, leaving Anthony with nothing but the sound of ice melting in a glass. Anthony didn't move from the bar for a while. The echo of David's words clung to him, sharper than the liquor burning down his throat. You had her, and you threw her away. It wasn't just a statement, it was a damn verdict. And for once, Anthony wasn't even trying to defend himself. The bartender offered him a third drink. He shook his head. Across the room, Sally had joined a small group of her friends. She was glowing, surrounded by soft laughter and easy smiles. But Anthony noticed something no one else did, how her hand briefly touched the necklace she still wore, a small silver heart. He'd given it to her years ago on her birthday. She'd never taken it off, not even after he left. That small gesture, unconscious, fleeting, ignited something raw in him. She remembered, maybe not fondly, maybe not painfully, but she hadn't erased him completely. He hated how much that mattered. Gloria came back in. Her smile was tight now, a performance just for appearances. She took Anthony's arm, to firm, to controlling, like she already felt him slipping. You're not going to talk to her, are you? He looked at her. Why would I? You're acting like you want to. He pulled his arm back gently. What I want doesn't matter anymore. But that wasn't true. It mattered to him. Every second he stood in this room, breathing the same air as Sally and pretending he didn't ache to rewind time, mattered. Gloria knew it too. That was the worst part. I'm tired of fighting with ghosts, she muttered under her breath. Just before she walked away toward the other side of the hall, Anthony watched her go. Knowing that conversation wasn't over, it had just gone quiet for now. He stepped outside again. The sky had darkened fully, and the night hummed with low music and distant car horns. Somewhere nearby, crickets chirped in rhythm. It was all maddeningly peaceful. Then, the door opened behind him. He didn't have to turn to know who it was. Sally. She didn't speak at first, just came to stand next to him, close enough that the warmth of her skin grazed his sleeve. Her perfume hit him immediately. Vanilla and something floral. He'd forgotten that smell, but not really. It had just lived somewhere buried inside him. I thought you'd left, she said finally. Should've, he murmured. Silence again. It was thick, but not hostile, just full of things left unsaid. You looked happy in there, he added. I am happy, she replied softly but firmly. He nodded. You deserve that. Sally tilted her head slightly, studying him. You look miserable. I am, he said, without hesitation. She didn't gloat, didn't smirk or twist the knife. That wasn't who she was. You made your choice, she said, not cruelly, just stating a fact. I just made peace with it. He finally turned to face her. I didn't leave you because I stopped loving you. I left because I was stupid enough to think that excitement meant something more than love. I know, she said quietly. That broke him a little. That she knew. That she understood him even after everything. But I won't be your backup plan, Anthony. I won't be your memory to haunt when things don't go right with her. I don't want a memory, he said. I don't know. I just wanted to say sorry. Sally gave a small nod. Thank you. I needed to hear that, but I don't need it anymore. He closed his eyes. I wish I'd fought for you. I wish you had too, she whispered. They stood in silence again. But now it was the end of something. She turned to go. Sally, she looked back. I hope he never makes you cry the way I did. She smiled. He won't, because I won't stay silent next time. Then she disappeared into the light, back into the room, into her new life. And Anthony remained outside, the night air biting harder now, like it finally realized he had nothing left to lose. The wedding wound down slowly, like a song fading out. Instead of stopping, guests trickled away, cheeks flushed from wine and laughter, shoes in hand, eyes loosened. The fairy lights flickered gently as the last of the music played. Sally and David were still inside, surrounded by a few close friends, taking the final photos, saying their goodbyes. Anthony stood in the parking lot now, hands in his coat pockets, eyes fixed on the entrance like he didn't quite know whether to stay or disappear. Gloria approached again, arms crossed, lips tight. She didn't say anything at first, just stood beside him like she'd already said all she could and none of it mattered anymore. You embarrass me in there, she finally said. Anthony didn't flinch. That wasn't my intention. No. I think your intention was to see if she still loved you. You got your answer, didn't you? He sighed. It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that, she snapped. I watched you from the moment we arrived. Every smile, every glance, every damn toast you weren't here with me. You were orbiting her like some pathetic ex who thought maybe, just maybe, he could win her back. She wasn't wrong. But it didn't sting the way she wanted it to. His heart wasn't here anymore. It hadn't been for a while. And the weight of pretending, of holding on to something just because he feared being alone, was finally too much. I cared about you, Gloria, he said gently, but I never stopped being in love with her. Gloria's eyes filled not with tears, but with fury. You don't get to say that now. Not after choosing me. Not after everything we've been through. I know. You could have left her and stayed single, Anthony. You didn't have to drag me through your emotional graveyard just because you were scared to be alone. He nodded slowly, accepting the hit. You're right. Her chest rose and fell quickly. Her voice trembled now. You don't get to walk away from me too. But they both knew it was already over. Even if they went back to his apartment, even if they played pretend for another few months, the truth had cracked through whatever illusion they had. Sally was never just a past. She was the past, the wound that never healed. Right. Gloria had always been competing with a ghost. Anthony didn't say anything else. He didn't promise to stay, and he didn't offer comfort. That would have been worse, cruel even. Gloria let out a bitter laugh, wiped her cheek with the back of her hand, and walked away toward her car. The sound of her heels on the asphalt echoed a kind of finality neither of them had the energy to deny. Anthony stayed a few minutes longer, alone now. The air was cooler, lighter, like something had finally been released. Inside, Sally and David were waving goodbye to their last guests. She leaned on his arm, tired but content, her heels dangling from her fingers. She looked peaceful, like the battle she fought silently for so long was finally over. David kissed her temple. Want me to grab the car? She smiled and nodded. As he went off, she looked out the glass doors for a moment and there he was, still standing, still watching. Their eyes met one last time. She didn't wave, didn't smile, but she didn't look away either. They held that stare like two people who had once been everything to each other. Two people who had walked into fire together and made it out separately. And that was enough. Anthony turned, got into his car, and drove off into the night, headlights slicing through the dark. No music, no destination, just silence and the haunting truth that sometimes you only get one real shot at love, and if you waste it, it never comes back the same way again. The next morning came slow and gray, like the sky couldn't quite decide if it wanted to rain or not. Anthony sat on the edge of his bed, staring at nothing, hands limp between his knees. The apartment around him was too quiet, just the low hum of the refrigerator and the ticking of the clock on the wall. Gloria's things were still scattered around. A jacket on the couch, her perfume bottle by the mirror, a toothbrush beside his. But she hadn't come home last night. He didn't blame her. Anthony got up and moved through the rooms like a ghost in someone else's life. He touched the back of the chair she always curled into with her book, opened the fridge and stared at the leftover takeout. They never finished. He tried to find the part of himself that cared enough to salvage it all, but there was nothing left to rescue. Not here, not with Gloria, not inside himself. By noon, he packed a small bag, just clothes and his keys. No idea where he was going. Maybe he needed to drive until the city disappeared behind him. Maybe he needed to feel what rock bottom really was so he could start figuring out how to climb back up. His phone buzzed. One new message. David, she doesn't hate you, but she doesn't love you anymore either. You should let her go, for both your sakes. Anthony stared at it. His thumbs hovered over the screen like they had something to say, but they didn't. Not anymore. Not to David. Not to Sally. Instead, he typed out something simple. Thanks for loving her the way I couldn't. He hit send, tossed the phone into his bag, and left the apartment. It rained a little on the highway. Just enough to blur the world into shapes. The kind of rain that makes everything look softer than it is. He drove for hours with no destination, windows slightly cracked, letting the cold air numb his face. He didn't cry. He didn't scream. But the ache sat deep in his ribs, spreading wider with every mile. Back in the city, Sally curled up on her couch with a blanket around her shoulders. David was in the kitchen making tea. She held the silver heart necklace in her fingers, twisting it slowly. She hadn't taken it off yet, not because she still loved Anthony, but because it reminded her of who she used to be. The girl who forgave too much, who waited too long, who begged for scraps of attention. That girl was gone. She'd buried her last night. Somewhere between Anthony's apology and David's quiet strength, David came over with the tea, kissed the top of her head. Long night, huh? She smiled softly. Yeah, but I'm okay. He sat beside her, their shoulders touching. Do you ever think about him? I did, she said honestly, but not the way I thought I would. He looked at her, curious. I used to imagine him coming back and begging for another chance, she said. I'd play it out in my head. What I'd say, how I'd forgive him just enough to make him hurt. But when I saw him last night, I didn't feel anger, just relief. David nodded, gently squeezing her hand. He left me for her, she said, almost like a confession. And I thought it broke me, but maybe it saved me. Because if he hadn't left, I would have never seen what love is supposed to look like. David didn't respond with words. He just looked at her like she was something rare, something worth protecting, something he didn't want to lose. In a cheap motel off the side of the highway, Anthony lay on a thin mattress, staring at a cracked ceiling. The silence wasn't peaceful, it was heavy. A reminder that he'd traded a lifetime of something real for the illusion of more. He picked up his phone again, staring at his screen. Sally's contacts still sat there in his favorites, but he didn't call. He didn't text. He just held the phone until the screen dimmed, then turned on his side and let the darkness settle in. The days blurred after that. Anthony drifted between cheap motels, roadside diners, and empty walks through unfamiliar towns. He didn't talk much, didn't make eye contact. He just existed, no plan, no destination, just distance. Distance from Gloria, from Sally, from the man he used to be. Each night, he lay in stiff beds with cigarette burns in the sheets, trying to sleep through memories he couldn't outrun. The way Sally used to fall asleep with her hand on his chest, the smell of her shampoo, her quiet laughter in the mornings. All of it came back now, not like nostalgia but like punishment. He tried calling Gloria once. No answer. He tried again. Voicemail. He left a message. You deserve better than what I gave you. I'm sorry it took losing everything to see that. No reply. Eventually, the silence became normal. It was what he deserved. Meanwhile, Sally settled into married life with David, though the word settled didn't quite capture it. Their home wasn't a place of escape, it was a place of warmth, of shared cooking, of reading in bed, of holding hands in grocery aisles. It wasn't perfect, but it was safe and real. Still, sometimes at night, after David fell asleep, she'd Lie awake and think about Anthony. Not with longing, not even with sadness. Just reflection. He had taken a version of her she no longer wanted to be. And she was glad he did, because now she had space to grow. One evening, she stood in front of her jewelry box. The silver heart necklace still hung from its place. She stared at it for a long time before she reached up and unfastened it from her neck. She laid it gently inside the box and shut the lid. Down the coast, Anthony got a job washing dishes in a small diner. The owner didn't ask questions, paid in cash. He kept to himself, eyes down, and arms wet with soap most of the day. It wasn't much, but for the first time in a while, he didn't feel like he was pretending. He was just being, quietly, honestly. One night, after a long shift, he sat on the back steps of the diner, cigarette in hand, though he didn't smoke, just held it, like a habit from a past he never had. A car pulled up nearby, headlights off. For a split second, his heart jumped, some desperate, foolish part of him imagining Sally stepping out, or even Gloria, but it was no one, just a delivery truck turning around. He let out a breath and leaned back against the brick wall, watching the sky. He hadn't touched alcohol since the wedding. It wasn't some vow or promise. He just didn't want to feel numb anymore. He wanted to feel everything he'd avoided. The guilt, the shame, the loss, because maybe, in feeling it all, he could finally let go. One morning, weeks later, he got an envelope forwarded from his old apartment. No return address, just his name and handwriting he instantly recognized. Sally. His hands shook as he opened it. Inside was a short note. Anthony, you don't need to say anything back. I just wanted you to know that I forgive you. Not because you deserve it, but because I do. Take care of yourself. Sally read it 3 times. Then again, he didn't cry, but something in him cracked open, and for the first time in months, the weight lifted just enough to breathe. He folded the letter, placed it carefully in his wallet, and stared at the sunrise creeping over the horizon. It wasn't a second chance, but it was peace, and maybe, just maybe, that was enough to start over. It was strange how quiet redemption could be. No applause, no grand gesture, just a man waking up one morning, brushing his teeth in a diner bathroom, and realizing he didn't hate himself as much as he used to. Anthony started showing up earlier to work, washing more than dishes, cleaning tables, fixing the old coffee maker, helping the cook prep when he wasn't asked. The owner noticed but didn't say much, just nodded once with a look that said, keep going. The rhythms of the diner became his structure. Coffee rush at 6, regulars at 8. The same old man who always asked for pancakes and never tipped. He remembered them all, remembered what it felt like to care about small things again. One afternoon, Gloria's name popped up on his phone. Just a text. You're right, I do deserve better. I'm working on that. You should too. No hostility, no bitterness. Just a clean cut in the thread that had tied them together through guilt and confusion. Anthony stared at the message for a while, then deleted it. Not because it didn't matter, but because it had served its purpose. There was nothing left to be said between them, and that in itself was closure. Back in the city, Sally had started a small side project, a blog about healing. Nothing dramatic, just honest thoughts, reflections on growth, love, pain. She wrote about her past, never naming names, never casting blame, but her words had a way of cutting through people, and they started to spread, quietly, organically. Some posts went viral. Women emailed her with their own stories of betrayal and starting over. Some thanked her, some cried. She never mentioned Anthony by name, but he was in every post, in between the spaces. Not as a villain, not as a ghost, just a turning point. David noticed the change in her, how she smiled more easily now, how she laughed with her whole chest, not cautiously like she used to. He never asked about the blog. He just supported her quietly, always within reach, and yet, in some part of her heart, Sally knew she hadn't fully closed the door. Not because she wanted Anthony back, but because she still carried the final question. Did he ever change? Weeks later, she got her answer. It was by accident. One of her readers sent her a message. Said she met a guy working in a diner in a coastal town, kind, quiet, always polite. Said she'd read Sally's blog and something about the way he talked reminded her of the stories. The reader included a photo. Just a blurry image of the staff at the diner during a local fair. Anthony in the back, arms folded, smiling a small, tired smile. Sally stared at it for a long time. Her heart didn't race. Her hands didn't tremble. She felt calm, like watching a movie you already knew the ending to. She didn't reply. She didn't need to. He was okay. That was enough. One Sunday morning, Anthony took a seat at the counter of the diner during a slow hour, sipping coffee he'd brewed himself. The sun streamed in through the windows. A couple of kids laughed outside. The world felt normal, not like punishment, not like the end. He reached into his wallet and pulled out Sally's note, still folded neatly. He read it again, the words familiar, almost memorized. I forgive you. Not because you deserve it, but because I do. He folded it back, put it away. Then he stood up, walked out into the sun, and for the first time in a long, long while, he walked with a sense of purpose. He didn't need Sally to love him again. He just needed to learn how to love himself enough not to ruin the next good thing. Spring arrived quietly. Anthony noticed it first in the way the trees outside the diner began to bloom again. Tiny bursts of green on once barren branches. The air softened, warmed. People lingered longer after their meals. Kids ran barefoot across the cracked sidewalks. Life was pushing forward, and for once, Anthony didn't feel like he was stuck watching from the outside. It had been 6 months since the wedding, 6 months since everything in his life cracked wide open and forced him to face who he really was. He'd kept his head down, worked, read, even started journaling in the evenings, just to empty the thoughts that used to chew at him all night. He stopped chasing things that didn't want to be caught. And for the first time, he began to see what healing looked like when it didn't rely on someone else. One afternoon, while wiping down a counter, the bell above the door jingled. He looked up, not Sally, just a woman with her young son, asking if they had grilled cheese and chocolate milk. He smiled, best in town. And he meant it. Sally, meanwhile, had launched a community group for women going through breakups, betrayals, and emotional rebirth. They met every Saturday morning in a rented library space. Coffee, tissues, open hearts. No judgment. She wasn't just healing now, she was helping others do the same. And with David beside her, she didn't feel like a woman picking up pieces anymore. She felt like someone who had built a whole new mosaic out of what was broken. Sometimes she thought about Anthony, not with pain, but with curiosity, wondering how he was, what he was doing, who he was becoming. And that wondering was enough. It didn't hurt anymore. One evening, while closing up the diner, Anthony was sweeping the floor when the owner approached him, wiping his hands on a rag. You ever think about managing this place? He asked. You've already been doing half the work. Anthony blinked, stunned for a moment. Me? Yeah, you. The man said, you're steady. You show up. People like you. You've changed since the day you walked in here, kid. I can see it. It hit Anthony harder than he expected. Not because of the offer, but because someone noticed. Someone saw him trying. I'd like that, he said after a moment. He took the job. He moved into a tiny apartment above the diner. He bought himself a second-hand bike, started riding to the beach on weekends, read more books, learned how to cook something besides instant noodles. He didn't become perfect, but he became better. One rainy afternoon, he walked into a bookstore and found a copy of a memoir called The Art of Letting Go. He picked it up. The author, Sally Whitmore. His breath caught for just a second. He flipped it open. Her dedication page read, for every woman who thought she'd never smile again. And for the man who taught me what I deserved even if he never meant to. He didn't buy the book. He didn't need to. Just holding it was enough. He left the store, umbrella tucked under his arm, rain hitting his shoulders in soft, cold taps. A few blocks away, the ocean churned gently under a gray sky. He walked down to the shore, shoes sinking slightly into wet sand. The water stretched wide and wild in front of him. Anthony closed his eyes and breathed deep. This was what peace looked like. Not a second chance with the woman he lost, but a first chance with the man he was becoming. And somewhere far away, in a warm house filled with laughter and love, Sally looked out her window at the falling rain, a soft smile on her lips, and felt without knowing why that everything had finally come full circle. The end.